We are now joined by the representative of Hungary. This is Mr. Mark Zagorac, BIM Association. His presentation is titled Actual Status of BIM Implementation in Hungary.
To talk to you about actual status of BIM implementation in Hungary. In my presentation, first I will start with a short introduction, and after I will talk about the private and public sector status in Hungary, and I will present you some implementation barriers and some development possibilities, and at the end I will conclude my presentation. So first, my colleagues are Patrick Mark-Mader and Mark Balázs Zagorac, and I am Olivér. We are both members of the board of Hungarian BIM Association. We both have experience in the public and private sector related to building information modeling. In the public sector, we have connection to the Lechner Knowledge Center, and we are delegated members to the Hungarian BIM Standard Institute, and we are delegated members also in the European Standard Institute. And from the private side, we have professional experience with the BIM Proof company in BIM management, BIM consulting, BIM audits, BIM modeling, and education. And focusing on the education fields, we are both teaching at the University of Pécs. Here in Hungary, we have obligatory courses in bachelor and master education, and we have also founded a specialized engineering program in BIM, but I will talk about it later. And we both members of the BIM Skill Lab Research Group, also here at the University of Pécs. So we can say we have a broad view of the market, and we are trying to present our experience in this 20 minutes. So first, let me introduce MABIM in a few words. So the aim of MABIM is to support the industry in the fields of BIM and share the accumulated knowledge. And what activities we do, we contribute in the standardization. So as I mentioned you, that there are delegated members to the Hungarian and European Standard Institute, and we also supported the ISO 19650 Part 1 and Part 2 translation. We do conference presentations about our case studies and also doing researches. And from the educational side, we organizing university courses. And for example, the MABIM coordinated the establishment of the specialized engineering program in BIM together at the University of Pécs and the Budapest University of Technology and Economics. And now let me talk about the public sector. What we see that in the public sector, we found that they are interested in the technology. They are trying to focus for digital technologies, and they have found that BIM can be a useful technology for the construction industry. So in the public sector, they're trying to acquire the theoretical knowledge of BIM and trying to find what methods and procedures can be adaptable in a public procurement, for example. And BIM takes a part of the national economic strategy too, and in the, or as we found that the public sector follows the private sector. So in the private sector, there are the developments, there are the best practices, and the public sector trying to find this information and trying to implement this information. And some examples of the efforts that, for example, in 2019, a BIM handbook was published by the Lechner Knowledge Center, digital workflow implementation in authority. We can find National Building Registry system, and there are efforts implementing digital workflows in public data support, for example, the e-public utilities. But as I know, Mark presented about these technologies last year. And focusing on the private sector, as we found that many companies, mainly the biggest or the bigger companies, trying to implement digital workflows, digital technologies. So they are refining their methods and procedures related to the contracts, the management fields, and the model usage fields. So they are trying also to acquire the knowledge about BIM. And as we found that now the private sector understands what is BIM and how it can be useful in a project. So we found a huge interest, of course, due to its benefits. But what implementation barriers we can see? Now I am presenting a few numbers from the National BIM report that was made in 2020 by the MBS, because we found that here in Hungary we have quite the same issues. So for example, the lack of in-house expertise, lack of specific training, the cost of the technology, differences in expertise among collaboration parties in a project, and lack of standardized tools and protocols. And the numbers are from the National BIM report, but we found also these things as barriers, as the things we need to solve here in Hungary. And what development possibilities we have? We are trying to manage and organize specific trainings. So not just separate trainings all around the country. We're trying to organize those, as I mentioned you, in the engineering fields. And we also see that the development can be made by studying and testing methodologies and procedures which are provided by the technology, which are provided by this digital model technology. And of course, BIM conferences are important to share the knowledge about BIM and about BIM project, share the experience which we have found, share the best practices which can be implemented in future projects. And it could be a good thing if the appointing party could also know about BIM and could study about BIM, because they are the investors. They can help, they can support the development of the implementation status. And of course, if you want to have a successful project, then for that we need a clear BIM requirements. We need clear BIM execution plans for the project. And as we found that application of standards can also support the implementation here in Hungary. And just as a figure that what is the way of BIM implementation in Hungary. So first, in the near past, we have started to check what the UK do with BIM, and they have this publicly available specification 11.19.2, which were the first standards here in Europe for this technology, for the building information modeling. And according to these standards, we have created handbooks, we have projects which case studies could help the higher level of implementation, and also there were individuals trainings which were held by companies mainly, which were held by software vendors. And after that, the ISO 19650 was published in 2018, which translation was published in this year, March. So now we have Hungarian BIM standard to support the market. And this standard and the practical parts where the knowledge sharing, I think, is in BIM conferences, can give us an organized structure for the BIM implementation. And as a result, or as a starting point for an organized BIM implementation, I think organized academic BIM education is needed for professionals and for students too. And from this education, we can have several BIM experts, which gives us a higher level of implementation. And of course, the regulation also connect to this way of implementation, because after we have experts, after we have knowledge about BIM, sorry, then we need to regulate the procedures. So we need regulations according to, for example, ISO 19650 and according to the best practices. And we have found a few questions that must be clarified in BIM projects to have successful projects. So we need to clarify what parties and functions are in a BIM project, which documents provide framework for successful BIM projects, what methods and procedures must be used according to the BIM uses, how should the tender be made in private or public sector, what are the BIM technical words and specific definitions. So we need to speak the same language. That's the last question. So first talk about the project parties and functions. So in the ISO 19650, these definitions, these names were used for the project stakeholders. So the appointing party is the highest level of the project, and the delivery team contains the prospective lead appointed party and lead appointed party and the appointed parties. And there are functions which were also defined by the standard, and these functions can contain roles in a real BIM project. So we have asset information management functions. For example, those are the appointing party, lead appointed party, and the asset information manager. We have project information management functions. Those can be, for example, the lead designer, project manager, general BIM manager, BIM auditor, or some BIM experts in the appointing party side, and project information manager. And there is also another function which is called task information management functions, which are the discipline designer, task team BIM manager, task team interface information manager and originator, or IFC manager or BIM consultant. And if we know that what are these functions and what are these roles, goals, and what are they doing, then we can find what are the framework documents for successful BIM projects. So for example, information protocol documents, it's very important, which is related to the common data environment, which is clarifying the warranties or liabilities associated to the project information model. It collects the intellectual property rights. It is controlling the use of existing and shared information or the reuse of information, and it also contains data security part. And there are two other documents, which is the exchange information requirement, which is related to the OIR and peer documents. These definitions are also coming from the ISO 19650. This EIR also talk about the acceptance criteria, the level of information need, the supporting informations, the dates related to delivery milestones and key decision points. And in the BIM execution plan, we have a detailed process and methods for how to deliver this project. So it contains, for example, the proposed name for information management functions. It contains information delivery strategy, organizational structure and commercial relationship, federation strategy, high-level responsibility matrix, project information, production methods and procedures, and etc., etc., etc. So that's a more detailed document. But what is the relation of these documents? So if we are talking about the exchange information requirements, then as I mentioned, it relates to the organizational, asset, and project information requirements. And from all of these type of requirements, we can create an EIR, and we can create a master EIR, which can be used for different project, which can be used for different appointments. And how an EIR should be in a public procurement. So in the public procurement, we can not do restrictions of the competition. So for example, we cannot say software specific 5 formats, but here in Hungary, we have some good examples. For example, we are also in a hospital refurbishment project where there is a very good structure of this EIR, which is containing the structure of the requirements, detailed requirement definition for different project phases, technical requirements, for example, about the model allocation. It also contains information exchange requirements, formats, date, coordinate system, logging, and management requirements. And it has also some attachments, for example, model production and delivery tables, and required web structure. And in the BEP, there are 2 parts of it. There can be a pre-appointment BIM execution plan and a post-appointment. The pre-appointment is usually used for tender response, which is containing higher level definitions, which is containing that we can do the job, but we are not going into the details. The post-appointment BIM execution plan containing a very detailed procedures, very detailed methods, and information about the delivery of the projects. And what is the relation of these documents? So the EIR containing the requirements, the pre-appointment BEP is the answer for the EIR, and after we get the job, we get the project, then we go into the detail. But when we're going into another level in the hierarchy, the project hierarchy, then we can find that the BEP can be also a requirement document for the different appointments. So we have a clear line for the document relations. So we have one requirement, one delivery strategy, one detailed delivery strategy, and according to these documents, we can define requirements for our appointed parties, and we can do an EIR, we can say, and they can answer in a pre-BEP. And these documents are the key documents for ensuring compliance with BIM requirements. I know it was a bit fast and a bit short introduction of the status, but in 20 minutes, that's the all what we can present you about Hungary. But what is the conclusion of this presentation? So, for example, a conclusion can be that we need BIM standards, and we need to apply and develop BIM standards to have an organized method, to have organized workflows in BIM project. We found that education is essential because everybody has to speak the same language. Everybody has to know what is BIM, what is a BIM model, what is the difference of a 3D CAD model and the BIM model, what information do we need, and we can get this information only according to education. And also, a success factor of a BIM project can be if we have a clear requirement and clear execution plan. If those are very specific, if those are clarified at the beginning of the project, then we can have more benefits from the BIM technologies. And also, as I mentioned some slide before, that BIM functions should be established, and those responsibilities has to be clarified. So from the 2D CRED drawing through the 3D model, we can go to the BIM model, and in the future we can build the digital twin of a real asset. And the use and implementation of digital technologies like BIM will certainly increase in the future in the construction industry. So that's what we see. That's what the trend is in Hungary too. And we believe that BIM will be used in all the projects, all the construction projects. And thank you for your kind attentions. Of course, if you have any question, don't hesitate to contact us. We have email addresses, and there are other contact email addresses for the Hungarian BIM Association or for the BIM Proof. And thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Zagorac.
Thank you very much for this presentation.